everyone. Good afternoon or good evening, depending on when you're watching this. And welcome to another interview here on Tales from the Wandering Scribe. I'm your host, Gabriel Garcia. Maybe you know me as the Wandering Scribe and the Wandering Quill. And joining us today is another incredible guest from South Africa. Now, my guest today holds a BA in Politics and History from the University of the Northwest in South Africa, a BA Hons in Ancient History and Classical Culture from Unisa, and a PhD from York. He taught history and English for 10 years at the senior matriculant level and is a book reviewer for the Cambridge University Press's Journal of Classics, Teachings, and the Rhea Classical Review. He contributed 2 chapters to the book Teachings Classics Worldwide, edited by Stephen Hunt and published by Bloomsbury, and it's 2 more upcoming titles with pen and sword. And in this episode, we're going to be talking about his latest book, which I am so excited to talk about, which focuses on a specific figure in Byzantine history. So without further ado, let's give a huge round of applause to today's guest, author and classical historian, Leslie Ivings. Leslie, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you very much, Gabriel. It's a pleasure to be here.
Awesome, Leslie. Awesome. I am so excited to have you here. Now, before we begin today's interview, is there a little known fact or a secret fact about yourself that many people may not know about you, whether your author background or your teaching history background?
Well, I did actually start teaching history. My first teaching job was I taught mathematics. So, yeah, straight out of sort of university, the first teaching job I got was not, in fact, anywhere near history related.
Nice. Very, very nice.
Yeah, and I spent now, as you say, 10 years in South African high schools, basically, mainly, now we say 9.5 of which was teaching history, and to our, what would you know, the high school leaving students that would go on to the universities or colleges, and then I then worked for the Department of Education, where I oversaw history implementation in 56 schools. That was the sort of the last formal sort of thing that we did. I did in for, what can we say, for normal history education. But yes, it is something that is very close to my heart, education in general.
Nice. Excellent. And as mentioned before, we're going to be talking about your title, which I am very, very excited. So as a little stepping stone, Leslie, what can you tell our viewers and readers about your latest book?
Well, my latest, this is actually my first solo book. So but I'll just pop it in here so that everyone can see it. The book is entitled Constantine V. He is Eastern Roman Emperor or Byzantine Emperor. And what I would like people to know about it, he is the story of a man that history basically forgot. Not because he wasn't important, not because he didn't do amazing things or controversial things, but simply because people and the powers that be had the influence to control history. And he who controls the quill, in your case, the wandering quill, could in this case simply write out an important figure or besmirch his character to such an extent that for hundreds of years, someone of his caliber just was plainly neglected or forgotten.
Fascinating. Very, very fascinating. So before we dive further into the creation of this book, Leslie, let's talk a little bit more about you. So as mentioned in your bio, you have been teaching for a very, very long time, and history seems to be very ingrained into your background. So I'm very curious, what was that spark that really got you fascinated into history? And then later on in life, what gave you the writer's bug?
that's quite simple. So when I went to university back in the early 2000s, I went to study basically to become an astrophysicist. Nothing to do with history whatsoever. Um, and I have a good friend who is now actually a professor of astrophysics, and he introduced me to, I think, which is probably a very evil thing, evil because it ate up my time. He introduced me to the very large university library that we had on the Northwest University campus. And all these wonderful old books, the old Loeb translations from all these different classical authors that I've only once, sort of gleamed in encyclopedias. Back then there wasn't really Wikipedia or Google like it is today. And I was absolutely captivated by it all. I think I wasted that first semester basically learning more from inside a library than I ever did in the classroom. And about 6 months later, I decided to change my entire field of study to history, because I always liked history, but this made me love it. And
Nice.
and then what made me want to write was even my second year of my new study. New study path. I got it into my head to write a book on the dynasty of the Severi. Now, this is the sort of chaps that they now speak about in the second Gladiator movie, the Caracalla and Geta figures, Father Septimius Severus. And I wanted to write a book about that. And, I got quite a far way until I only realized that, listen, this ain't no good. This is this is positive drivel that you are writing, and I didn't take it up again until just after COVID.
Oh, okay.
Just 2021, because at that stage, I'd always wanted to, but there was always teaching, there was always this and always that. Something got in the way, and I found myself out of work, as many people did. And I said, well, I've got to do something to fill the hours. And I took a complete flyer at sending a proposal to Pen and Sword. And lo and behold, this is what resulted. And that we now have subsequent projects as well. And I'm never happier now than writing than when I've ever been before.
That's amazing, Leslie. That is incredible that you're able to combine both your passions of history and writing and build upon it. So now let's talk about the book in of itself. Now, as you mentioned before earlier, that this is your first solo book that you have been writing. You are the author and you are the researcher. Now, in terms of like the idea stage, out of all of the figures in Eastern Roman Byzantine history, what really drew you to this particular Byzantine emperor to write about?
Well, I was reviewing a book by the very esteemed Dr. Peter Crawford for the Journal of Classics Teaching, and it was a biography of the Byzantine Emperor Justinian II. And I was myself. I was just kind of scrolling along and looking at the various lines of emperors that led up to Justinian II, and those that basically just came after. And this, I looked at the start of what was the end of the Heraclian dynasty, and I saw the beginning of the Isaurian dynasty, and I saw Leo III, which I knew there was a book about. And then I saw his son, and I saw that, my goodness, this chap had a very interesting nickname, which was Opronymos in Greek. Basically, if you want to have the polite translation of it, it is the dung named, or if we can use the more expletive one, it was shit named.
Wow.
And I said, well, a chap who has got that sort of nickname, there must be something why he's gotten this. And then that was the reason that piqued my interest and why I ended up starting to research him.
Nice. Now, after you settled on this figure to be the basis of your book, as you were outlining, did you have like a very clear, distinct outline of the story you want to tell, or did the outline come about naturally in the sense of you knew the middle, you knew the beginning, you knew the end, the middle, we'll see where the research takes us?
The middle was most definitely, we'll see what the research would take us at that specific time. Because I knew that I wanted to reform his character, or in the same, in the way that we would say, well, this is a replevin, a sort of legal recovery of the man. I knew that, but I also knew that many aspects of his reign are controversial. And yes, I mean, this as I said in many previous times, by no means is Constantine the Fifth a saint. Don't get me wrong. This man did some, some horrible persecutions, but the fact is that he rescued an empire that was on the brink of collapse. It was not for him and his father. The Eastern Roman Empire, or Byzantine Empire, would have basically ceased to exist long before the official end in 1453. And I said, well, if someone who is in charge of writing history could basically create a character and make him so bad, how many other characters are there in history that the same fate has not befallen? So I said, let me first start with him. It's very easy to research. Let's follow the example and let's see where it goes. And eventually it took me to this place where we have a sort of symbiosis of extremely good things, some bad things, and a result which I think I'm very happy with, to say, yes, this emperor, this man deserves his story to be told, not just to an academic readership, by the way. This is for the general sort of avid historical public reader who would have never have wanted to go and read about Constantine the Fifth. Goodness knows, 5 Constantines already, and so this is something to say. But yes, here's another man that is deserving and interesting to be read about. That's why I ended up finishing this book.
All right. And as our first fan question of the interview, one of my viewers asked, when writing about this figure, what really surprised you about his story?
Well, the first thing that surprised me is, of course, that his father proclaimed him co-emperor already at the age of 2, because he was born in the middle of a siege in the year 718. The city of Constantinople was under siege by a massive invasion of the Umayyad Turks, of the Umayyad Empire, and his father was basically trying to salvage and maintain the city of Constantinople. And right in the middle of this, wee little Constantine is born, and short 2 years later, in 720, his father proclaims him as co-emperor. Now, this was done not just because his father was, a bit crazy, but it was to basically create a dynasty. He wanted to solidify right there and then that he had replaced all the chaos that had come before that, and it had been more than 20, 30 years of chaos that had reigned in the Byzantine Empire. And he wanted to say, right, this is a new start. And by taking a very youthful toddler, really, he wanted to also say that this is innocent, pure, something brand new like a baby, to add that sort of dynastic flavor, but also to put the flavor of innocence onto it. So that was the first thing that very much surprised me. This was a tradition that had been going on even in the normal Roman Empire, where they had elevated boy emperors before, but it was now a practice that Leo III very heartily took up.
Fascinating. And as you mentioned earlier, Leslie, you wanted this book to not be solely for an academic audience, but your average history enthusiast, public, general reader. So ultimately, with that in mind, what was the promise you're making, not just to yourself, but to your future readers? And also, looking back on that, do you feel that you've hit your goal?
My first goal was to give to the primary public out there, because Pen and Sword is not, not just for an academic reader. It's for a lot of history buffs out there, and I wanted it to be readable, enjoyable, something that you could say, oh, that was a fun fact. I did not know that. This makes me want to read more on this subject, even if it was not just in Byzantine history, but just makes me want to read more history in general. And because, in the times that we are living in, where history faculties, classical faculties, are cutting down on staff, cutting down on funding, I thought it very important to bring this type of history to people and to say to them, listen, this is good stuff. There's lots of value, there's lots of lessons
Mhm.
that can be learned from this. Let's enjoy it, not make it stuffy and inaccessible. You think this is just for someone in an ivory tower. No, this is something that anyone can enjoy, whether you are a Byzantine scholar or not. Now, as the second part of your question, whether I achieved my goal, I'm very self-critical. I'll tell you right now. I am my own worst enemy, as most of us are.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I still feel that because I was a teacher for such a long time, that my book sometimes feels a little bit too textbooky for me. Sometimes it feels like there's too much school teacher still in it. But I've had other people that friends who read it and said, no, you're being far too hard on yourself. So I don't know if they're just being nice or if they're being the truth. But I know that one thing, though, that I've learned from writing my first solo piece is that my next book, for example, I think I did better. It's a continuous process. I mean, it's progress, not perfection, as they always say. So, but I hope that the general reader will come away with it and say, well, here is now something that I have learned anew and has made me at least interested in the field. Then I'm done. Then I'm saying that's brilliant.
Absolutely, very true. Now, this is so much on the more of your historian background, Leslie. As you're writing the historical figures in this book that are tied to the emperor, how did you make them feel authentic and really showing the reader who these people were, as opposed to just stating as we normally would, since we are academically trained, in like a research report or an academic journal slash essay?
Yeah. That's a very important question, then, because if you just go the normal academic route, you find you get a two-dimensional figure, which is no fun whatsoever. So you had to take someone. I'm going to use the example of Constantine's wives, or even his daughter-in-law, which is a fascinating figure herself, Irene, that would end up marrying his son. And
Mm.
I would introduce the sort of character quirks that to enliven them. Because we sometimes think that some of these historians just wrote down this. He did this on this date and he killed so many on that date, or he hated these people on such a date. No, some of they have cute anecdotes as well there. And I take those anecdotes, which in a normal historian's case, I take them and I flesh them out a little bit more to say, make the character an approachable one. Because if you would just look at the cover of the book, I didn't use a standard coin that you would have gotten from Constantine's own period. I used a later depiction of him from 12th and 13th century manuscript. It's not at all probably what he looked like, but at least the figure is more entertaining than looking at a very badly printed old coin that has no
True.
relation to the man whatsoever. So you have to color him in. You have to make it flesh and blood, not just cold ink on paper.
That is very true. That is very true. It's this very interesting balance when writing nonfiction style books and trying to not make it too academic with the jargon, but also showcasing the research behind it, which can definitely be a challenge. And there are going to be days where, as authors and historians, we're going to have stopping points in our mind where we cannot write. So, for you, Leslie, how did you overcome the dreaded writer's block when it came to those moments?
Yeah, my one friend who served as my first sort of guinea pig editor or proofreader, if you will, he also asked me that. And now I'm very fortunate that I review books for now. It's now three entities or three journals that ask me, and that's Journal of Classics Teaching, the Cambridge Classical Review, and then now the Rhea Classical Review, which is in the United States. The other two are in Great Britain. Now they send me books to read and to review. Now when I'm busy writing and I hit a position where I'm now that I feel blocked, it's the perfect time for me then to pick up someone else's book and start and read it because I'm reviewing it. And I follow their style, I follow how their mind works, the ideas that come out, and it sort of enlivens my mind because it opens up possibilities of which of you know, can say, oh well, I can also do that. That's a good idea there. This guy or this lady, she had a perfect sort of way to do this. I can also learn from this and apply. So it would stimulate my brain. It's literally my brain taking a break from my work, thinking along another line of someone else's work if this is any good. And then it would sort of invigorate it to say, ah, this is not just a distraction, but this is something I can learn from. And that's how I've managed to keep up the pace, even at certain times you really do want to put your head in the dark and put out the light and say, I'm not here anymore, and the book doesn't have to be written.
Yes, that is also very true. Everyone I've had on the show thus far has said the exact same thing. There are going to be those moments where we don't want to write, we just want to put our head in the corner and just say, not today, not today. But sometimes, writing even just for like 10 or 20 minutes does help in the long run. And as another fan question, Leslie, my viewer asked, which is a two-parter, in writing your book, what was probably the favorite chapter that you've written, and what was the most challenging chapter to write?
I'm going to start with the most challenging chapter, and that was basically the chapter on Constantine V's iconoclasm, his religious belief.
Mm.
Now, the iconoclasm, for those unfamiliar with the term or are familiar but don't exactly know how it works, iconoclasm was a form of Christian belief which says that no icons or any old-fashioned graven images were allowed in churches. Now, for those of your listeners that might be brought up in the Greek Orthodox tradition, Catholic tradition, statues, icons of saints and Virgin Mary, Jesus, they are very common in those churches. Very, 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 very common. But Constantine was totally against that. He had this almost what we would now call today a Protestant sort of bleakness, nothing but a plain old-fashioned stylized cross. That's it. No other images whatsoever. He persecuted people that put or venerated icons. And that was the most difficult thing, because how do you take a man who is otherwise doing brilliantly as a military commander, as an administrator, and as an upholder of the law of his empire, but on the same hand, he is doing all of these other terrible things, persecuting basically the faithful for just having a slightly other viewpoint than himself. That was the most difficult, to balance it out.
Hmm.
The easiest or the fun, the greatest fun that I had was learning about the amazing women that surround him. The stories that you don't get told. They're often hidden in the shadows, or sometimes briefly touched on. Um, his daughter-in-law that I mentioned earlier, Irene, she would come to be far more influential and far more even controversial than he was. She would be the sort of very first Byzantine empress that would rule by herself. A woman ruling a vast empire just by herself. I didn't know this until I started reading about this. I mean, you touch on it, say basics of it at university level, but you don't go into that depth. See that she is a fascinating figure, and then what happens is that you discover all these other fascinating figures like Theodora and that have the same similar story, and then you realize, but nobody is writing for the general public about these people, and you say they so deserve a book. The greatest or the best or most fun discovery in this book is discovering that these forgotten women that deserve a volume of their own.
Hmm. Interesting. Very, very fascinating, Leslie. And it seems that in researching this figure, you've uncovered a lot of elements of Byzantine history that you yourself had not realized. And I myself, as a fellow classical historian and author, I knew very, very little about that period in Byzantium history. And I'm wondering if that's the same case for others. So once you had written the book and you got it with pen and sword and they did all of their magic, at what point did you tell your family and friends that not only had you written a new book, but you got it published with pen and sword? And what was their general reactions like?
Well, so I had to tell them quite early that I am going to write a book, because I hadn't started anything. I just submitted a book proposal, and my editor Phil Stitnell at Pen and Sword said, "Okay, you've got a year to write this." There's one problem at the time, one massive problem. I didn't even have a laptop.
Oh, no.
I had at that stage, like I said to you, I was out of work. I had my work laptop, which had been taken because of the massive budget cuts that we were faced with. So I had nothing. I didn't have the financial means even to procure a laptop. I had my cell phone, and across from where I stay, there is a Volkswagen. There was a Volkswagen dealership, and I knew the owner for many, many years, many years, Mr. Mohammed Iqbal Kalu. I can give him a plaudit. And he asked me, "Why are you so down?" And I told him this is the situation. And there was a young lady that worked for him at the time. She's now my partner, by the way, just in case. So she would, in the evenings, smuggle out a laptop and bring it to me in the evening so that I could write. During the day, I would write longhand, and at night, I would basically type it out on a borrowed laptop, which I had to return by 7:30 the next morning. And over weekends, I could keep it over the weekend. And eventually, my old laptop from when I was doing my master's and things, um, another friend of mine, we kind of refurbished it and got it running, so I didn't have to. But this is my story. And then I had all these people, including my parents, my friends, who all came out of the woodwork and said, "Yes, but you were always supposed to do this. Let us help you get to that point." That's why I think in my first book, why my acknowledgement section is so long, because I had an incredible amount of support from friends that I had made on Facebook, also classicists and classical historians that were just nothing but supportive, because you couldn't always get to research material from university libraries or access to journals. And I just had to ask. I would tell you, it wasn't 5 minutes later, someone would send that article to me or send the PDF version of a book to me. And that was probably, so I had to mention it, or I had to say to everyone, look, I've started this project, but I'm going to need some help.
That's amazing, Leslie. I'm glad you're able to get that support system, that group that's really been behind you, and pretty much telling you and saying that you've always were meant to be a writer. That is amazing and really great to hear. And now the next set of questions are more so reflective. And the first one, which I'm really eager to hear your thoughts on, Leslie, is, in your opinion, what does it mean to be an author in the digital age? Because the publishing industry and the industry of being an historian has greatly changed in the last 20 years or so. The internet and social media has been a boon to network and connect with other like-minded people, to do episodes, interviews such as these, and to promote our books. But it also heightens our anxiety, imposter syndrome, some elements of negativity, because social media does have that, and many, many more. In terms of marketing our books, it's not easy, because it's never been more easier to publish something and promote something, or say to sell something, but it's never been more difficult to market something. And it is not easy for authors and historians. So, with all that said and done, Leslie, for you, what has disciplined you to not only continue down this path, but possibly branch out into other avenues of research for future books?
Well, this question, yeah, I remember the sort of first time I discussed it with also someone in the publishing field, and he said, "Oh, you're never going to make a living at this. Oh, this is unless you started this in the 90s and had a big following by then, then you'll never, be able to do anything really or gain many meaningful traction." And I thought to myself, fair enough. I know what book sales were doing, but um, no one ever tried anything. What's the point? I mean, if you don't go ahead and do something, this is something that I have been passionate about for so many years, that I've drilled into students' heads, that I'm so happy to say that still to this day that they come up to me and say thank you. So I would be letting down that sort of thing if I didn't. If I just said, okay, no, I'm, because of all the hard work in marketing, in trying to take this book and sell it, and having author pages and going on podcasts and speaking about it, it would be a betrayal of all those years of hard work that I put in studying. It would be a betrayal of the hundreds of students that sat in front of me for all those years. It would be a betrayal even, in a sense, it's a betrayal of myself. It's a betrayal of my core, who I am. That Gnostic Afton, the know thyself. It would be a complete betrayal. So I couldn't just stop. And this is when I said, when I was busy with this book and I came up, I said, well, I know what I'm going to write about next. I know what I'm going to write about after that. And I even know what I want to write about after that. And I said, well, this is what you are going to do, and you're going to push on through this, and this is going to open other doors for you. This is not just going to be about trying to plug one book on a couple of shows, get meager royalties, and then pop one out every 2 years because you've got nothing else to do. This is something that I consider more serious even than my day-to-day job. That's how much I invest in it. I'd like to say, you speak about the imposter syndrome, and you speak about negative comments on social media. Yeah, sure, you get them. As a teacher in front of a class of 16-year-olds and 17-year-olds, you're kind of used to negative comments don't much faze you, so you learn to grow that thick skin, because the moment they smell fear or blood in the water, then they will pounce on you. So I don't pay much mind to that. I try and do my work as best, as ethically and as cleanly as I can. And if I'm happy and I can sleep with my sleep easy at night, then I know I've done a good job.
Amazing, Leslie. Very, very, very true. And this one kind of goes into now this topic of is it a golden age or an iron age we are living in for authors? Because as you mentioned before, around during COVID, that was a very bleak time for everybody around the world. And from what I've seen, especially in this year alone, a lot of the guests that I've had on my show are not only authors who began their careers as writers, but also historians and historical content creators who took their passion for history and built upon it in the early years of the lockdown. And with that said, there has been this debate of whether or not, because of the lockdown, that we are in a golden age, or we're more so in an iron age because the market has been saturated. So if we look at just from the authors, the new authors that have entered into the publishing industry, in your opinion, Leslie, from probably talking with other authors or just seeing the news here and there, do you believe that we are in a golden age or more so towards an iron age?
I would almost say that I disagree with both of those things. Yes, we've got lots of writers. Yes, we've got lots of people trying to push books. The problem is that in the current climate of the world that we live in, we have a world that is getting dumber.
Mm.
We are a world that is trying to look at falsehoods and not truth. Historians, as if you're a proper historian, you're focused on giving a truthful account. One of the first things that we ever learned when we studied the first history class was about Herodotus and about
Yes.
the motives behind why he wrote, or Thucydides, why he wrote, and what can we learn from him. I mean, Thucydides says he is Athenian. He doesn't make bones about it. He says right in the beginning, so listen, my perspective is going to be skewed. And I listen, and he says, also on the first page, he says, listen, I wasn't there for a lot of this stuff, so I'm putting words in people's mouths, which I think they should have said. So as an historian, I want to, in a world where there's a lot of writers, but there's also a massive amount of untruth, or it's Orwellian in many cases. I want to go and say, right, these are the facts. If we cannot be honest, at least about who and what we were, how on earth are we going to be honest about who we are at the moment? So we have lots of writers, and there are fantastic people out there, but we also have divisive figures out there that try and work with various ideological and political agendas to move and to invent things that were never there, and to make this topic something that is divisive in itself. History is supposed to be a unifying force. I live in a country which is multiracial, which has a sordid past of only 30 years ago, and it constantly has to deal with it. And we, in our sort of classical and ancient historian community here, we have embraced the fact that the way that classical culture can mix with African culture, can mix with European transplanted culture here in the way that it's been received. And not, we don't just have to throw it away. We can embrace it and we can move forward and create more branches to study it. And so, yes, there is a golden age for writers. There's an iron age, I suspect, for, yes, a saturation of market in certain aspects, but then there's an overwhelming dark age that seems to creep up on us daily through false narrative. And I wrote a post for a podcast not so long ago about ancient falsehoods, about combating theories such as ancient astronaut theories and stuff like that we get on History Channel, and which you don't. I mean, why do you call a channel History Channel when the stuff that's shown on there is not even fact? These things disturb me, but I'm glad that I have many excellent colleagues out there that go at it every day to try and dispel, untruth and outright blatant lies.
Well stated, Leslie. Well stated. So now let's go and shift gears and focus on the business side of being an author. Now, when your book did get picked up by Pen and Sword, and you had the year to write and get it ready, and it was published, what really surprised you about the publishing process, in your opinion? And looking back on the launch of your book, is there anything you would have done differently in terms of promoting it?
Yes, I think I would have started sooner. Definitely. People, and this is something, I'm someone in my 40s, and I think perhaps this is the age showing, is that, social media and the internet and even Facebook and all that, they move a lot faster. And to keep your book relevant, you have to be at it for long. And I would have probably have started a month, 2 months ahead of where I did actually start to promote or to let people know it's coming.
Nice. And going back to again in the beginning, you've again mentioned that when writing this book, you wanted to be this balance between the academic side to showcase that aspect of who you are, being classically trained in writing history, but you also wanted this to appeal to the general audience and average history enthusiasts. And this is kind of also a fan question of itself. How challenging was that to, in a way, reteach yourself how to write history? Because again, we are taught academically to write in a certain way, but if we're writing for the general public, it has to be slightly different.
Yeah, that's a big learning curve, definitely. What helped me a lot, I think, is I did read popular history, as it is called, also, but and I did first try the sort of, for the first couple of pages, imitation is the best form of flattery, and but I needed to discover another voice, and my friend Craig Eisenstein, who is basically a playwright and a novelist, and I got him involved, and I said, Craig, listen, I'm going to send you some things. I want you now to give me your most critical, most deep-seated, opinions here. Don't spare my graces. Just tell me. And I'm lucky enough that he's such a good friend of mine that he did. And I sent it to another couple of people, and they also made it. And I took that very constructive criticism, and I tried to implement it as I went through the book. I believe that from my first chapter to my last, from the first chapter, I can say I steadily made improvements to my last. But when I got to the end, I said, especially to the last chapter 7, and the prologue of the epilogue, I beg your pardon. in conclusion, I said, yes, here I could feel it more. That I actually went back in the editorial process and I looked back at some parts of chapters 1 and 2 and reworked some paragraphs.
Okay, all right. And another one of my fan questions, one of my fans actually does ask, ooh, this actually is a really good one. Is there a particular figure in the book that you would like to explore in a future novel?
Well, the figure that I would most like to explore is the Empress Irene. Straight. So and it was on another podcast that also I was asked, these women, don't they deserve it? I said, yes, they do. And I would love to be able to in the future volume, although it's not currently in the volumes coming up. I would love to be able to explore her in detail.
Nice. And pardon me, this Irene, if I'm not mistaken, as you mentioned earlier, this is the famous Irene of Athens,
Yes,
correct? The famous one who almost accepted a marriage proposal from Charlemagne, correct?
yeah, that's 100% correct. But
Yes.
ended up
Oh, go ahead.
marrying, but ended up marrying his son, and then being the mother of an emperor, and the wife of an emperor, and the daughter-in-law of an emperor. But yeah, it's entirely correct. She must have been quite something to have a figure like Charlemagne, even wanting to also to marry her. So there must have been some extraordinary attribute to her, and this is why one of the reasons also that I want to explore her.
Nice. And that is true, viewers and listeners. In history, there was almost an attempt to combine the Byzantine Empire with the Empire of Charlemagne. It would have, had it gone through, granted, there's multiple what ifs in history in trying to figure out what logically would have happened. But if things had gone the way they should have been correctly, you would have probably had the most powerful empire of the late antiquities era, possibly going into the early medieval period. It would have been a blend of cultures because you would have had the army of the Franks mixed in with the Byzantine army. Yes, language would have been a clear issue because you have early French and Latin, and the Byzantines more Greek speaking. Religion, a huge issue. Greek Orthodox, Roman Catholics, very, very distinct. But that is a very interesting what if in history that I have seen numerous times over in historical videos and episodes from different creators. And it's so incredibly fascinating. Now, changing gears just a little bit. This is another really important one, which I'm very eager to hear your thoughts on, Leslie, is as an author and as an historian, we all could keep writing no matter what. We can keep talking about history, we can keep writing about history, but at the end of the day, we do know we have to stop at a certain point. When writing this book, when did you know when the book was finished and when to stop writing?
Yeah, there was that famous saying that about the preacher who said he could write shorter sermons, but he wouldn't get so bored. So no, the thing how I realized, listen, it's now time to stop, is when I glanced down after quite some time at that total word count when I had put a lot of things together, and I saw, okay, this is getting way above what Pen and Sword gave me to write. And I said, you are doing something that is not not at all even going to remotely sell. And when I sent it to if I had sent it that time, they would have said to me, no, thank you. Here is your pile of paper back. No, so that's when I realized. I said when I was about 10,000, you can say about 10,000 words over. So I had to prune, give or take 9,000 and something odd words. It was basically a chapter and a half that I had to say, no, sorry, I can't have it. Yes, it's fascinating. To me, it might be fascinating, but I don't think it really belongs in a general audience or general historical audience book. This is far too academic when I read it, and that no way of what I told you about how I got better at it would save this. So
Mm.
you have to make a very brutal decision. It's like
Right.
it's like Dumas killing D'Artagnan. You've got you're crying about it, but there's no use crying about it. You just got to do it.
Absolutely. Very, very true, Leslie. And this next fan question, before I get to the final questions, is a very, very specific one, which I'm so happy to ask this to you because I'm really eager to hear your thoughts. And I'm going to paraphrase a lot of what my reviewer asked because it's a lot. Ultimately, they're a student in university. They are researching late antiquities, and they've come across a very interesting theme in terms of like research books. That if you're studying late classical antiquities, most of the books are on the Western Roman Empire. Not a lot of books are on the Eastern or Byzantine Empire. And she would like to ask you, in your opinion, as an author and as an historian, has there been any difficulties in terms of not only marketing a book on Byzantine Eastern Roman history, but just sharing and teaching Eastern Roman history from a historian's perspective? As even though it existed longer after the fall of the West, there's more books on the Western Empire as opposed to the Eastern Empire.
Now, yes, it was normally the case that there had been a lot more on the West.
Mm.
If you have a look, if you go to any bookstore, just go down that side, you'll see infinite amounts of books on Julius Caesar and Cleopatra and so on and so forth. But one thing that did also change was the entry into the sort of the history market of people like Peter Sarris in his magnificent biography of Justinian. Also now, very recently, Jeremy Swist with his wonderful biography of the Emperor Julian. And these types of people made it possible for other authors to enter the market. And this is now on late antique and Byzantine studies. And because they popularized something, they made it okay, not just for, to read other parts of Roman history, something more Greek in flavor. And for those sort of trailblazer guys who took it on first, because the previous sort of works that were available in Byzantine history was terribly academic, terribly. And they took it and they said, and remember, I'm going to use Peter Sarris as an example. I mean, he is no slouch. He is a fellow at Trinity College, Cambridge. He's been professor for many, many years. He has written several books about it and on Byzantine history. And he took it, the genre, and made that you can write for a major publisher on this subject. And that opened up a lot for us to enter this market. Now there is just now also being released in November, slightly later than my book in the US, is a biography of Nikephoros II. What was his nickname? The White Death of the Saracens. I mean, this is it made it possible for me to get a commission from Rutledge to write a biography on the Emperor Theophilus, the last iconoclast emperor. So the interest in this has grown over the last few years, which I'm very happy about, because
Absolutely.
for people and because I could have specialized, I could have done the whole thing of just being sort of the mainline second century, first century Roman history, but for me it feels like it's been covered by so many people, and there's so many excellent people already in there. I don't think I could contribute, but here I could at least contribute something.
Absolutely. Very, very true, Leslie. I could not agree more. And I think we need a lot of scholarship on the Byzantines, on the Eastern Empire, Eastern Roman Empire, because their history is very, very fascinating. Especially, I also love learning about the military history side of the late antiquities world. And the Byzantines are no exception. I have scoured the interwebs, and in a community poll by a lot of professors and academics at, I want to say Yale, they've actually gathered information about the top military emperors. And the one that comes most is Basil II of the Macedonian dynasty. And for those that don't know, Basil II is known as the Bulgar Slayer.
Mhm.
During his conquest, he was quite possibly one of the most ruthless military emperors of his day and age. His most infamous statement was blinding his enemies and sending them back home. If that doesn't send a clear message, I don't know what. But he, among many others, are really, really fascinating. And tying it all back together, I am so giddy talking about Eastern Roman history because, again, I don't read a lot, and there's not a lot of books that I have seen either from a fiction side or nonfiction side. So that is why I'm very excited having you here, Leslie, to learn about this figure in Eastern Roman history and really bring awareness to not only him, but the history that he is a part of. Ultimately, as we're nearing the end, Leslie, what do you want people to take away from not only this figure in Eastern Roman history, Byzantine history, but your work as the author and the historian?
One takeaway that I would like people to have is very simply that history is nuanced, complicated, and we must always be mindful that figures who we think are important, even historical periods that we think are unimportant, like you mentioned now, let's say the underrepresentation of Byzantine history, that if we look deeper, we find the more fascinating parts. As that old classical saying goes, he who remains ignorant of the past will remain forever a child. So here is something which I'd like us to say we can learn from and grow up a little bit and to expand the knowledge of our world, which we live and which we share, and we can make more interesting conjectures. I mean, if we can inspire one child to go to a library that does not access books, or just to use the interweb and to look for up things and read, I believe you don't have to see. I don't have to sell a single copy as long as I can get that right. To pass on the love of it to somebody else.
Very true. Very, very true, Leslie. And with all that said, what is your word of wisdom to not only fellow authors listening to this interview, but fellow historians who not only want to expand their options in history, but to also teach the history that they want to teach?
Don't be afraid of the obstacles. Push through. Winston Churchill, keep buggering on at all times. Keep going forward. It might seem daunting. I got through it. Um, Sometimes I question still how it was, but I did. I just put blinkers on my eyes and just went. And I believe that if we revive that sort of passion, that we were just going to do it because it needs to be done, then that is what I wish for them to have.
Excellent, Leslie. Excellent. And with that, viewers and listeners, we conclude another author and historian interview here on Tales from the Wandering Scribe. I want to give a huge thank you to our guest, Leslie, for coming on the show, telling us all about his journey and his book. And Leslie, again, thank you so much for coming on the show. Where can people find you on social media to reach out and connect, as well as purchase a copy of your book? And do you have any special announcements, any book appearances, any upcoming projects you would like to share, any journal entries that we can look forward to in the new year?
Well, first of all, if you want to find me, yes, there is. You can find me on Facebook on my author page. You can find me on my website, www.leslieivings.co.za. And my book, for your listeners in the US, is available on Barnes and Noble and then on Amazon.com. Its release date is on the 30th of November, although in Europe it has been available since September. So if you want to look at Amazon.co.uk or on Pen and Sword's own website, they're more than welcome to do so as well. Those are the main sort of places where, and they're welcome. If you go to my website, even if you go to my Facebook page, my email address is there, and I welcome anyone to send me emails, whatnot, to ask me questions, to engage. I love speaking to people about it. As to upcoming things, I am about to submit my second manuscript to Pen and Sword. It deals with the year 238, the year of the six emperors.
Ooh.
It's I call it Rome on the Brink, and how 238, the lessons learned there impacted both Eastern and Western Roman history, and I draw the parallels there. And then I have, in this week, I'm off to the University of Stellenbosch for an academic conference. First time that a non-academic been invited to speak at an academic conference at that specific university about the Byzantine states, how they took care of the most needy in society, the aged, orphans and widows, and of course, people who had been injured in war.
Awesome. I will link all that down below in the description of this video. Thank you everyone so much for joining us for another incredible interview here on the show. Want to give a huge thank you to our guest, Leslie, for coming on the show. We wish him the very best. And if you would like to see Leslie back on the show in either an episode of the Writers Hub or possibly in season 4 of the Historians Lounge, comment down below and I will try to make it happen. And as always, viewers and listeners, thank you so much for your love and support. As always, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to stay up to date with all new updates. And make sure to check out my previous episodes because I have some special surprises you do not want to miss out on. Until then, have a wonderful evening, everyone. This has been the Wandering Scribe and the Wandering Quill. Signing out. Wish you all a wonderful day wherever you are in the world. And we'll see you all in the next episode.